Previously. Like I initially thought in the beginning of the video, I thought I'm going to be taking the heads off and rebuilding them. But as it turns out, head covers are in back order till like September. So in this case, for us to remove the chain, all we have to do is take off this sprocket itself. We're not going to be taking off the entire Vanos gears because also, on top of what I ordered, a kit for this came with everything but these two little chains, right? So there's no reason for me to take them off. Eventually I'll pull this motor out and rebuild it just like I am with the V10. But for now, I'm just going to be doing the timing chain guide maintenance, right? I'm going to replace this. So since all these bolts are already loose, just remove them, okay? Remove all the bolts. They're all the same size. Pull them out. I kind of hate that, like, you can't have music playing.
Well, in the video you can.
Yeah, in the video it looks like, wow, these guys are having such a blast. Be careful when you're removing this guy because there is a spacer. There's like two little plates, so be real careful when you're removing this. There's two plates. Do not mess up the order. Since we're not redoing anything really on these, we're just gonna leave them in there. Make sure that they're all good and they're in good condition. There's no cracks, and that's really it. See, there are two plates. Don't mess up the order and leave them the way they are. Wipe them clean. Put it aside for now. Just like that, this sprocket can be easily removed, like so. Okay. There we go. Again, wipe this little guy clean. Again, when you're doing this, if you're not rebuilding the heads, like it turns out I'm not, be careful with those head gaskets because you don't want to bend them, you don't want to damage them in any sort of way because then you're just going to be leaking oil from there. Ladies and gentlemen, the chain is out. Just like that. That is quite a chain. It's my mini junkyard. That's the crankshaft from the V10 and then the chain from there. And from the accident, so
my radiator.
That's your radiator, yes it is. Okay, so this is gonna be a size 10 mil. This is supposed to just pull off. This guide is removed. As you can see, there's definitely wear on it, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Those little star-shaped bolts, those are gonna be E10. Okay. That's loose right here. That's loose. And one up top right here. That one is very loose for some reason. So this bottom bolt for this rail, this guide, that's an E12 size. There we go. Wow, that is torqued down real nicely. That is removed very nicely. Here we are. Cool. Make sure you replace this O-ring. See it on here? There's an O-ring here. And there's the same kind of O-ring on that, right underneath the Vanos gear, the exhaust gear. The kit that I got, I bought it from FCP Euro. They sell an entire kit of, you know, this whole job pretty much, except it doesn't include these chains. I didn't know that. Regardless, we'll pull the motor later, we'll rebuild it later. But for now, we're just doing these, dude. The entire plastic piece just broke off. Luckily, I didn't drive anywhere on this. That would have been bad. This guide right here already comes with the new O-ring. Great. It's already on there, it's mounted. All we gotta do is just pop it on. This little peeper goes inside here. There's this little opening for it. You wanna lubricate it up with just a smidge. There we go. Lube it up, stick it in there. There we go, just like that. And we're gonna be applying it from the bottom in order to avoid the head gaskets, right? And we wanna touch them as least amount of times as possible. Pop it right in, it slides in just like that. Put them in order the way they should be so that you don't confuse them because they are different lengths. Don't tighten anything quite yet until all the bolts are in there and they're seated nicely. Just do a good 2 Newton meter torque just as a seating torque. Quite simply, just torque down the bolts. Nice. So this bottom one, kind of like a clip, clips onto this bottom. This middle piece, it goes onto this little stopper right here. There we go. take that one bolt, screw it in, and torque it down. So then with the timing chain itself, it's a little bit more tricky. Like that. Make sure it doesn't skip any teeth or anything. And this is where it's gonna get a little bit tricky and a little bit interesting. When you take these guys back, it has to sit perfectly on the correct teeth so that these holes would align with those holes, and so that it wouldn't be taking on too many teeth, you know what I mean? So, kind of have to do a little bit of playing around here. That's not good. Put a couple teeth over this way. Okay, we got some slack. That's fine. That's completely fine for now. Since this tensioner is completely loose right now, we're not tightening anything yet. So you know, those are not aligned. Ooh, this is gonna be fun. Okay. That's on. I managed to align this one. See, the holes are matching with the holes in the back. And I realized for me to move this and give it some tension and whatnot, I have to put in one bolt just to kind of secure the placement of the sprocket itself. So now I'll be messing with this one, giving it some tension, seeing how I, seeing what I could do. Something to note here, very important. You see how the camshafts, they have the timing tools in them, right? The bolts are in there, they secured them right in top dead center. If you notice, this bolt, I just put it as an example, this bolt is perfectly aligned with that centering bolt. That's when you know that the cams in the sprocket are all in top dead center, as well as this one. See how this bolt is aligned with that one? You're solid. We could move on. Make sure that the exhaust gear, right? You see this little top hole? It's supposed to be facing directly upward, right? Make sure that these centering bolts are still attacked and your camshafts are still at top dead center. Make sure that this little hole is facing upward, and then that little hole on the side of the hub itself, it's facing that way. So it's in between these two bolts, and then this hole is in between the top two bolts, right? Before we apply this, we have to make sure this is also aligned properly, right? So you see this hole right here on the hub, the center one, it's also supposed to be facing up. So about the same angle as this little hole, right? For you to put this on though, the tension of the chain has to be tensioned. So I just put this little bolt as a stopper. Let's remove this guy real quick. Make sure that the discs inside are in their little holes. They're sitting properly and they're not moved. Put that guy in and just kind of secure it with the bolt just for now. That's that for now. Let's double check now that these bolts are centered with these ones, right? They're perfectly aligned. Great. Now, keep in mind, remember on that side, how I said that this hole is supposed to be facing up? Same here. But you notice that it isn't. I didn't move it like this. This was this way. In this case, if it's moved like this, all you do is you remove these bolts. You make sure, first of all, just double check that this is all, that these spacers are perfectly set, they're perfectly aligned with their position. And make sure that this hole, the parallel one to the centering one, is right in between these two bolts. Perfect, so that's good. Now, what we gotta do is rotate so that this hole is facing upward, just like so, and that these bolts are right in between. Just like that. I'm gonna put these bolts back in, just secure them in place, and now you know that everything's aligned and everything's perfect, and we can move on with this. Just as a side note, when you put these bolts in, don't tighten them all the way, just so that you could still move. You see this top hole? Just so you could still move it a little bit. It only goes so much to left and right, but all you do is you twist it all the way to the left, just so that it would be facing as straight up as possible. On this side, on cylinders 1 through 5, same thing. You can still move it. Make sure it's positioned all the way to the right, so towards the center of the block, right? That way it's completely facing upward, and we are solid. Turn these all the way to the right also, and we're good. When you're installing this hub, same sort of thing like we did on cylinders 1 through 5. Make sure that this hole on the actual hub is facing also straight up. Make sure that these spacers or sleeves, whatever they're called, they're perfectly in there. Make sure it's facing up. Secure it with a bolt. Don't tighten them all the way yet, just secure it. When we're gonna be doing timing, we're gonna be putting the Vanos units back on. They have to be shifted all the way to the right, all 4 of them. So as far right as they go, that's what you do. And you kind of finger tighten these bolts just so it wouldn't move as much. There wouldn't be too much play. Kind of just give them a few tight squeezes. And that's it for now. Next up, we are installing the Vanos units. And if you haven't seen how to rebuild those, you can click right here. That's how you rebuild them. It's a separate video. But meanwhile, we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to install them and go from there. Before we put this cover back on, we want to replace the front main seal, which it comes with the FCP Euro kit. So we're going to oil it up, take something flat, and kind of just hammer it in. If you've seen our previous videos, you know how this goes. So I'm gonna take some lubrication, the good old, lube up the seal, take a piece of wood, something flat, and start pushing it in. Make sure it's going in even. Ooh, so close. There we go. Seal is flush. So now we're going to be installing these gaskets. Make sure you do not confuse these two angled ones. They're different, so just put it up on the cover, see which one goes where, put them on, and you could leave them on there temporarily. Make sure not to bend anything, just so it'll be seated nice and smooth, like that. These little grooves over here on these gaskets, they're made to go into the block, so that's when you know that this one goes on the left side, or on the right side. Put it on. This one is about to be on. Before we put the cover on, make sure that this oil pan gasket is degreased. Use some sort of degreaser or a lacquer thinner. Make sure it's clean. You also degrease all the areas so that the gaskets will seat nice, because it is a reused gasket. I'm going to be applying a gasket maker. Get some sort of high temperature one. Apply a small coat onto the lower portion of the cover. Make sure it's spread all out evenly. Just a small coat, and make the same sort of coat on the actual oil pan gasket itself, just as a precaution. You don't want to be leaking oil after this procedure. When you're putting the front cover on, since we already seated the seal, the front main seal, it's important to go really slowly, lube it up, oil it up, take like a really small flathead and just kind of make it fit on the actual crankshaft itself so it wouldn't be forced, but rather seated properly. Alright, so as you can see, this lower cover is already on. It was fairly easy. I mean, what made it even easier is if you remove the dipstick, there's only one 10mm nut and you just pull it up. Obviously, you gotta lube up the crankshaft and the seal for the seal not to be damaged, and it slipped on really easy, just very nicely, just loop, it slips on and it's good. If you don't know already, we're obviously reusing the oil pan gasket and the head gaskets, right? To me, it's a little bit strange they have to reuse gaskets. It never works. I don't know, I've never done this one. This is my first time doing this, but I mean, this can't do any damage. So what I did is took some silicone adhesive, some just very high temperature silicone adhesive. I applied a little coat onto the actual head gasket itself. I put those two gaskets on over here, one on each side. You put those on. You wipe the area clean before. You wipe this area clean right before you apply the silicone, and you just apply a little thin coat just on the cover itself. And it's quite simple. You just smoothly slide it on and you apply the bolts on. After you seat the cover, take the bolts in the order that they were in, finger tighten them all the way around. Just make an even finger tight torque all the way around. All the bolts that are facing towards you, you take those and you tighten them down to a seating torque of 2 Nm. And then you take all the ones that are facing the block, so downward towards the ground, you take all those and you tighten them all down to 10 Nm. After that, you tighten the rest in here, kind of in a star pattern, to 10 Nm also. And your head cover is seated. So as you can see right here, tighten these down to 2 Nm, tighten all those to 10, and then tighten all these to 10 also. And after all covers are tightened to torque to spec, this is when we replace the timing chain tensioner. It's a 19mm bolt. Please replace your tensioner, man, and your O-ring. You have to. These just, they affect everything, man. Honestly, it goes underneath them there. You can tighten it down to 50 Nm. 50 Nm. You tighten it down and you have tension on your chain. And then we're gonna be installing the vanos. And that's gonna do it for this video because it's getting a little bit too long. Make sure to subscribe because in the next video I'm gonna show you how to properly set the vanos units and how to properly make timing on this S62. In that video, you're also gonna see the first startup and the genuine startup of this car after this job. So you know that it's not a bunch of BS, okay? Thank you and peace.